We don't want you around our kids, she said at the park, so I left with my niece and the private tutor I hired. The scorching Texas sun beat down mercilessly on the Riverside Park playground in Austin as I watched my 7-year-old niece Emma struggle with her math workbook. Her little face scrunched up in concentration, pencil hovering uncertainly over multiplication problems that should have been simple for a second grader. But Emma wasn't like other kids her age. She had been diagnosed with dyscalculia, a learning disability that made numbers as foreign to her as ancient hieroglyphics. My name is Rebecca Martinez, and at 28, I had become the unexpected guardian angel in my niece's educational journey. My older sister Maria worked double shifts at the hospital as a nurse, barely making ends meet after her divorce. When Emma's teacher suggested she might need to repeat second grade, Maria broke down in tears. That's when I stepped in with a solution that would change all our lives forever. I had been working as a freelance graphic designer, building websites for small businesses from my downtown Austin apartment. The work paid well enough, and more importantly, it gave me the flexibility to help where my family needed me most. So I made a decision that raised eyebrows throughout our extended family. I hired Mrs. Catherine Williams, a retired special education teacher with 30 years of experience, to work with Emma 3 times a week. Mrs. Williams was a godsend, a patient, kind woman in her early 60s with silver hair and the most encouraging smile I'd ever seen. She specialized in helping children with learning disabilities, and within just 2 months, Emma had gone from crying over homework to actually enjoying our practice sessions at the park. That's where we were on that sweltering Thursday afternoon in June when everything changed. Emma was working through a set of addition problems with Mrs. Williams while I researched potential clients on my laptop nearby. The park was busy with the usual crowd, stay-at-home moms with their perfectly dressed children, nannies pushing expensive strollers, and the occasional dad working remotely from a park bench like me. Emma had just successfully completed her first page of problems when she jumped up excitedly. "Tia Becca, look. I got them all right." Her face beamed with pride as she ran over to show me her workbook, Mrs. Williams following behind with an equally proud smile. "That's incredible, Mija," I said, pulling her into a hug. "You're getting so good at this. Should we celebrate with ice cream after we finish?" Emma nodded enthusiastically and skipped back to the picnic table where her materials were spread out. That's when I noticed them, a group of 3 mothers sitting at the adjacent table, whispering and glancing in our direction with expressions that made my stomach tighten. I recognized one of them, Sharon Foster, a woman I'd encountered several times at this park over the past few months. She lived in one of the expensive neighborhoods near Zilker Park and seemed to consider herself the unofficial queen of the local parenting scene. Her blonde hair was always perfectly styled, her workout clothes clearly cost more than most people's rent, and she had a way of looking at others that made them feel inadequate. The whispering continued for another few minutes before Sharon stood up and walked directly toward our table. Her designer yoga outfit practically screamed wealth and privilege, and her expression held the kind of cold determination I'd seen in corporate boardrooms. "Excuse me," she said, her voice carrying that particular tone wealthy white women use when they're about to say something devastating while pretending to be polite. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but we need to have a conversation." Mrs. Williams looked up from Emma's workbook with a gentle smile. "Of course, dear. How can we help you?" Sharon's eyes flicked dismissively over Mrs. Williams before settling on me with undisguised hostility. "This is a family park. We bring our children here to play and learn in a safe, appropriate environment. Frankly, your situation is making other parents uncomfortable." I felt heat rise in my cheeks, but I kept my voice steady. "I'm sorry, but I don't understand what you mean by our situation." Sharon glanced back at her friends, who were watching intently from their table. "Look, I'm sure you're nice people, but this park is primarily used by families from the surrounding neighborhoods. We've invested a lot in keeping this area family-friendly and educational. Having tutoring services operating here sends the wrong message." The implication was clear, and it hit me like a physical blow. She was suggesting that because Emma needed special help, because we couldn't afford to live in her fancy neighborhood, because we didn't fit her narrow definition of what belonged in her park, we weren't welcome. Mrs. Williams, bless her heart, maintained her composure even as I could see the hurt flash across her face. "Ma'am, we're simply helping a wonderful little girl with her studies. There's nothing inappropriate about education." Sharon's laugh was cold and sharp. Education? Please. We've been watching for weeks. This child clearly has problems, and frankly, we don't want our kids exposed to that kind of influence. Children pick up on these things, and we work hard to provide our kids with positive role models. The words hung in the air like poison. Emma, who had been coloring quietly, looked up with confusion in her dark eyes. She didn't fully understand what was happening, but she could sense the tension, the cruelty in Sharon's voice. That's when Sharon delivered the line that would echo in my head for months: "We don't want you around our kids. This is a community space, but that doesn't mean everyone belongs here." The silence that followed was deafening. I could feel the stares of other parkgoers, some sympathetic, others curious about the drama unfolding. My hands clenched into fists as rage bubbled up from somewhere deep in my chest. But before I could respond, something unexpected happened. Mrs. Williams stood up slowly, her full height making her more imposing than her gentle demeanor usually suggested. When she spoke, her voice carried decades of authority for managing difficult parents and advocating for vulnerable children. "Ma'am," she said, her tone remaining respectful but firm, "I've been an educator for over 30 years. I've worked with thousands of children and their families. And in all that time, I've learned that the children who struggle the most often have the biggest hearts and the most to offer the world." She gestured toward Emma, who was still listening intently. "This little girl works twice as hard as most children just to understand basic concepts. She shows up here 3 times a week, eager to learn and improve. She's kind to every child she meets, shares her snacks without being asked, and celebrates other people's victories like they're her own." Mrs. Williams paused, letting her words sink in. "If you don't want your children around that kind of influence, around perseverance, kindness, and determination, then perhaps you should examine what values you're actually teaching them." Sharon's face turned red with a mixture of embarrassment and anger. "How dare you lecture me about parenting? I know what's best for my children, and I don't need some hired help telling me otherwise." That's when I found my voice. Standing up slowly, I felt every ounce of my family's fighting spirit surge through me. My grandmother hadn't immigrated from Mexico and worked in fields for 12 hours a day so that her granddaughter would be intimidated by entitled strangers. "You're absolutely right about one thing," I said, my voice steady despite the fury burning in my chest. "This is a community space. Which means it belongs to all of us, including families who don't live in million-dollar houses, including children who learn differently, and including people who believe that kindness matters more than zip codes." I began gathering Emma's materials, my movements deliberate and calm. "But you know what? You've actually done us a favor. Because I'd much rather my niece learn her lessons somewhere she's surrounded by people who appreciate her efforts instead of people who see her challenges as character flaws." Emma looked between me and Sharon with wide eyes, not fully understanding the adult conflict but sensing that something important was happening. Mrs. Williams helped pack up the tutoring supplies while maintaining her dignified composure. "Come on, Emma," I said, taking her small hand in mine. "Let's go somewhere we're actually welcome." But as we walked away, I heard Sharon call out one more time, "Fine by us. Maybe now our kids can use this park without feeling like they need to dumb themselves down." That comment stopped me in my tracks. I turned around slowly, and when I spoke, my voice carried the weight of every challenge my family had ever faced. "You know what your kids are going to learn from this interaction? They're going to learn that when someone looks different from you, learns different from you, or struggles with something you find easy, the appropriate response is exclusion and cruelty. Congratulations on that lesson." We left the park that day with our heads held high, but my heart was breaking. Not for myself, I'd dealt with prejudice before. My heart was breaking for Emma, who spent the car ride asking why that mean lady didn't want her at the park, and for all the children whose differences would be treated as defects by people like Sharon Foster. That evening, after Emma had gone to bed at Maria's house, I found myself staring at my laptop screen, unable to focus on work. The incident at the park kept replaying in my mind, each cruel word echoing like a bell that couldn't be unrung. Maria came into the living room with 2 cups of coffee, her nursing scrubs replaced by comfortable pajamas. She could see the tension in my shoulders, the way I was gripping my coffee mug like a lifeline. "Emma told me what happened at the park today," she said softly, settling onto the couch beside me. She said some lady was mean to you and Mrs. Williams. I sighed, leaning back against the cushions. I knew we might face some challenges helping Emma, but I never expected that level of hostility. It was like she saw Emma's learning disability as some kind of moral failing. Maria was quiet for a long moment, and when she spoke, her voice was thick with emotion. Becca, I can't afford private school. I can barely afford the tutoring as it is, and you know you're already doing too much by paying for most of it. What if Emma internalizes this message that she doesn't belong places? What if she starts believing there's something wrong with her? The weight of responsibility settled on my shoulders like a heavy blanket. Emma wasn't just my niece, she was the light of our family, the little girl who had brought us all together during Maria's difficult divorce, the child who reminded us all that love and persistence could overcome almost any obstacle. That's not going to happen, I said with more conviction than I felt. We're going to find a way to make sure Emma gets everything she needs to succeed, and we're going to do it in an environment where she's celebrated, not tolerated. The next morning, I woke up with an idea that was either brilliant or completely insane. I had been building websites for local businesses for 3 years, slowly accumulating a modest savings account. What if I used those skills and resources to create something bigger? What if instead of just helping Emma, I could help kids like her all over Austin? I spent the entire weekend researching learning disabilities, educational resources, and community programs. What I discovered both broke my heart and fired my determination. Emma wasn't alone, there were thousands of children in the Austin area struggling with dyscalculia, dyslexia, ADHD, and other learning differences. Many of their families, like ours, were working multiple jobs just to get by, with little time or money for specialized educational support. But I also discovered something else. There was a growing movement of educators, therapists, and advocates working to change how society viewed learning differences. Instead of seeing them as problems to be hidden, they were beginning to understand them as different ways of processing information that often came with unique strengths. That's when I made the decision that would change everything. I was going to create Austin's first mobile learning support program specifically designed for children with learning disabilities. Instead of expensive therapy centers that many families couldn't access, I would bring specialized tutoring directly to families in community spaces throughout the city. The business plan started taking shape in my mind. I would use my web design skills to create an online platform where parents could connect with qualified tutors who specialized in various learning differences. We would offer sessions in parks, libraries, community centers, anywhere families felt comfortable and welcome. Most importantly, we would make it affordable through a sliding scale payment system, with partial funding from grants and donations. I called Mrs. Williams first, knowing that her expertise and reputation would be crucial to making this dream a reality. "Rebecca, dear," she said when I explained my vision, "that sounds absolutely wonderful. I've been hoping someone would start something like this for years. There are so many children who could benefit from specialized support, but their families simply can't access traditional services." Her enthusiasm gave me the courage to take the next steps. Within 2 weeks, I had incorporated Learning Bridges Austin as a nonprofit organization. I applied for my first round of grants, created a basic website, and began reaching out to other special education professionals who might be interested in joining our team. The first few months were exhausting and exhilarating. I worked my regular web design clients during the day and built learning bridges in the evenings and weekends. Maria helped with administrative tasks when she wasn't working her hospital shifts. Emma became our unofficial mascot, her progress with Mrs. Williams serving as proof of concept for potential donors and supporters. Our first major breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, a pediatric neuropsychologist at Dell Children's Medical Center, had heard about our program through Mrs. Williams. She invited me to coffee to discuss a potential partnership. "What you're doing is exactly what this city needs," she said, stirring her latte thoughtfully. "I see dozens of families every month who receive diagnoses for their children but then struggle to find accessible, affordable support services. Your model could fill a crucial gap." Dr. Walsh introduced me to other professionals in the field, including occupational therapists, speech pathologists, and educational specialists. Within 6 months, Learning Bridges had assembled a team of 12 qualified tutors and therapists, all passionate about serving families who had been overlooked by traditional systems. Our official launch event was scheduled for a Saturday morning in October at the same Riverside Park where Sharon Foster had tried to make us feel unwelcome. It was a deliberate choice. I wanted Emma and other children with learning differences to reclaim that space and transform it into something positive. The week before the launch, I was nervous about attendance. Would families actually show up? Would the community support what we were trying to do? My fears were put to rest when I arrived at the park at 8 a.m. to find a line of parents and children already waiting. Over the course of that morning, nearly 200 families visited our information booths, participated in educational workshops, and signed up for tutoring services. Local news stations covered the event, and several city council members stopped by to offer their support. But the most meaningful moment came when I spotted a familiar figure watching from a distance. Sharon Foster stood at the edge of the park, her usual entourage of privileged mothers surrounding her. For a moment, our eyes met across the crowd of celebrating families. I expected her to turn away or leave, but instead, she began walking toward me. My stomach tightened as she approached, memories of that awful confrontation flooding back. "Ms. Martinez," she said, her voice uncertain in a way I'd never heard before. "Could I speak with you privately?" We walked to a quiet corner of the park while Emma played on the swings with some new friends she'd made. Sharon looked uncomfortable, her usual confidence replaced by something that looked almost like vulnerability. "I owe you an apology," she said finally. "What I said to you and your tutor that day was inexcusable. I was wrong, and I've been thinking about it for months." I waited, saying nothing. After what she had put Emma through, she would need to do more than offer a simple apology. Sharon continued, her words coming faster now. "My youngest son, Tyler, has been struggling in school this year. His teacher suggested he might have ADHD and recommended testing. When the results came back positive, I realized." She paused, her voice catching slightly. "I realized that I had been so afraid of my children being seen as different that I had become exactly the kind of person I would hate if Tyler needed help. The irony wasn't lost on me, but I found myself feeling sympathy for her despite everything that had happened. It's hard when your child faces challenges you don't understand," I said carefully. "Would you?" Sharon hesitated, looking down at her hands. "Would Learning Bridges consider working with Tyler? I know I don't deserve your help after what I did, but he's struggling, and what you've created here seems like exactly what he needs." It was a moment of choice that would define not just our program, but the kind of person I wanted to be. I thought about Emma, about all the children who had been made to feel less than because of how they learned. I thought about the mother standing in front of me, humbled by the realization that her child was now part of the community she had tried to exclude. "Sharon," I said, extending my hand to her, "every child deserves support, and every parent deserves the chance to learn and grow. Of course we'll work with Tyler." The transformation in Sharon's face was immediate and profound. Tears filled her eyes as she shook my hand gratefully. "Thank you. I promise I'll do everything I can to make up for what I said. Maybe I could volunteer. Help with fundraising or organizing events." And that's exactly what she did. Over the following months, Sharon Foster became one of Learning Bridges' most dedicated volunteers and advocates. She used her connections in wealthy Austin neighborhoods to organize fundraising events that brought in thousands of dollars for our sliding scale payment program. More importantly, she became a powerful voice for changing attitudes about learning differences in communities where those attitudes mattered most. The park that had once been a site of exclusion and hurt became the weekly meeting place for Learning Bridges families. Every Thursday afternoon, you could find children with various learning differences working with their tutors, playing together, and celebrating each other's victories. Parents who had felt isolated by their children's challenges found community and support. Emma thrived in this environment. By the end of third grade, her math skills had improved dramatically, but more importantly, her confidence had soared. She began helping other children with their reading, discovering that her struggles with numbers didn't diminish her strengths in other areas. "Tia Becca," she said to me one afternoon as we cleaned up after a particularly successful tutoring session, "I'm glad that mean lady was rude to us that day." I looked at her in surprise. "Why is that, Mija?" Emma's smile was wise beyond her 8 years. "Because if she hadn't been mean, you wouldn't have started this program, and all these other kids wouldn't get help with their learning. Sometimes mean people accidentally do good things. As I write this story now, 2 years after that confrontational day in the park, Learning Bridges Austin serves over 300 families across the city. We've expanded to offer support groups for parents, advocacy training, and even college preparation programs for teenagers with learning differences. Our success has inspired similar programs in Dallas, Houston, and San Antonio. Maria was recently promoted to nurse supervisor at her hospital, and she credits the confidence she gained from watching Emma's transformation for giving her the courage to pursue leadership opportunities. Emma is now in 5th grade, maintaining B+ grades in all subjects and serving as a peer tutor for younger students who struggle with reading. Mrs. Williams, now 67, has become our program director and shows no signs of slowing down. She recently told a local newspaper reporter, "In all my years of teaching, I've never seen anything more beautiful than watching a child discover that their differences are actually their strengths." Sharon Foster and I have developed an unlikely friendship built on our shared commitment to ensuring all children feel valued and supported. She recently joined our board of directors and has helped secure a major grant that will allow us to expand our services to rural communities outside Austin. But perhaps the most meaningful outcome has been the change in community attitudes. The park where we were once made to feel unwelcome is now known throughout Austin as a place where all children belong. Families drive from across the city to participate in our programs, and the original group of parents who witnessed that first confrontation have become some of our strongest supporters. If you've stayed with me through this entire story, I want to ask you something important. Have you ever encountered a situation where someone tried to make you feel like you didn't belong? Have you ever seen a child struggle with learning differences without knowing how to help? Have you ever had to choose between staying safe and standing up for what's right? Your experiences matter, and I'd love to hear about them in the comments below. If this story moved you, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. We're committed to sharing stories of people who turn moments of exclusion into opportunities for inclusion, who transform discrimination into determination. Sometimes the cruelest words become the catalyst for the most beautiful changes. Sometimes the people who try to make us feel small end up inspiring us to create something bigger than we ever imagined. And sometimes, the children who are told they don't belong end up building communities where everyone belongs. That day in Riverside Park, Sharon Foster thought she was protecting her community by excluding my niece. What she actually did was inspire the creation of a movement that has touched hundreds of families and changed how our city thinks about learning differences. Emma still struggles with math sometimes. She probably always will. But she's learned something far more valuable than multiplication tables. She's learned that her worth isn't determined by her challenges, and that the world is full of people who will celebrate her exactly as she is. When people ask me what I'm most proud of about Learning Bridges Austin, I always give the same answer: we didn't just create a tutoring program. We created proof that every child deserves to be seen, supported, and celebrated. We created evidence that communities become stronger when they embrace all their members, not just the ones who fit a narrow definition of normal. And we created a legacy for Emma and all the children like her, a legacy that says their differences aren't defects to be hidden, but gifts to be honored and strengths to be developed. That's what real community looks like. That's what real success feels like. And that's why I'll never regret standing up to a bully in a park on a hot Texas afternoon, even when she was trying to exclude the most important person in my world.